Two Dimensions, a space comedy. Tonight's episode, The Origin of Two Dimensions. Greetings, three-dimensionals. I'm Nagy, creator of the space comedy Two Dimensions. I'm taking this first foray into the video dimension to establish a starting point for anyone interested in my webcomic, Two Dimensions, or the space magic that goes on behind the scenes. Let's jump right in. Although I love creating, I never considered myself an artist. The free-form art would cover the margins of my notebooks like tattoo sleeves on a super tame prisoner. Retracing those simple shapes and designs I found was a soothing way to stretch my mind and problem solve. Those mindless scribbles have laid waste to countless pages unfortunate enough to fall prey to my terrible artistry. This is part of why I didn't believe I could ever make a comic. It wasn't even on my radar. And I worked through several different options before I landed here. Those are top secret topics we'll openly reveal later. I casually crafted my unique art style, and after a few years of practice, I've only improved. Yes, it's not high art, but it's the perfect conduit to channel my personal brand of humor. I bring up my lack of talent because it's important to remember that if you want to make something, don't let your own perceived skill level get the better of you. Just keep working at it. Succeed or fail, you're going to get better at your craft and happier in life because you're working on something you love. In the same way I love working on Two Dimensions. I've been a creative person all my life, so it's hard to narrow down when Two Dimensions officially started. And since this isn't an autobiography for someone nobody knows, me, it's probably easiest if I start with the first time I drew our intrepid leader, Captain Sid. It wasn't my intent to design a character to base Two Dimensions around. I wasn't even thinking about making a comic when I originally created Sid. I was out late at a chum's place when the topic of drawing came up. I offhandedly mentioned how everything I make comes out cartoony. Maybe you could tell that much already, eagle-eyed viewer. My buddy asked me to draw an example of my style, and like a golem set with instruction, I got to work. After a few more minutes, more than I'd like to admit, I had sketched out the first of many Sids. In many ways, it's still my favorite one. Then, that first sketch of Sid sat on my desk collecting dust for a couple of years.
And some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend. Legend became myth.
While that sketch of Sid reached perfect, desk-aged condition, I continued creating. At the time, what enamored my limited attention span was comedy. More specifically, stand-up comedy.
What's the deal with observational comedy? It's bad.
During this period, I reflected on the composite of jokes and what vein of humor best encompassed myself. FYI, it makes rewatches of your favorite shows even more interesting. Now, my initial sets were dramatically raunchier than my current work. Time has truly mellowed my razor-sharp edges. With each set I finished, my friend would review them and come back with notes and constructive criticism to improve my craft. This exchange allowed me to grow as a comedian and helped me see that, even though I was nervous, improving is worth putting yourself out there. I was heavily active on Twitter during this time. Rest in peace. Shooting out quick jokes that garnered less attention than myself as a child. But I was having fun, so I kept at it. Like most people who dabble in comedy, my next inclination was to immediately investigate podcasting. Yes, the world nearly suffered through another armchair expert podcast. The fact we didn't proves there is good in the world. But at the time, I thought it was a fun idea, and an effective way to get my name out in cyberspace. What I was looking for from podcasting was what I found missing from stand-up and Twitter. A unique perspective, a wall to bounce jokes against. I felt my work was falling flat without a more interactive element, a partner. I had bits and gags that would only work when played between multiple parties. So off I went, bulky microphone in hand, to record my first podcast episode with a friend, ready to try something new. There are things that go well, and then there are things that don't. The attempted podcast was a clear example of the latter. When two people with uncontainable knowledge and even more attention deficit get together, a structured conversation forms as often as lead turns into gold, which could happen, but we all know it won't. Turns out that our entertaining talks are better off enjoyed in private. The results were in, and the podcast was a bust. Regardless, we had a blast, so I set off in a new direction, creeping ever closer to making 2 Dimensions video games. Super Mario, Fallout. Others, who doesn't love them? You may have noticed that the webcomic is, in fact, not a video game, but my following project was. I wish I could say it was a never-before-thought-of, high-octane thrill ride that would change the landscape of gaming forever, but that would be hard. So instead I set to work on a simple, pixel-graphic adventure, role-playing game. Since I'm fairly certain it's a law, punishable by death, that you can't make an adventure RPG without placing it in a medieval setting, my location was decided. I worked on all your standard RPG areas. Lost Woods, Sandy Desert, New York, and of course, the dreaded water level. Oh, how I loathe them. For the purposes of 2 Dimensions, the most relevant aspect that garnered my fleeting attention span was character design. Building creatures around specific ecosystems helped me focus on creating a variety of monsters and locations. Though almost none of these designs would ever make it into 2 Dimensions, the rusty cogs in my brain were beginning to grind away. I skidded to a stop when I fully realized the true scope of building a game by myself. The task was far too great, even for me at my most manic. Right off the top of my head, there's designing, scripting, programming, testing, and that's just too much for one person. I'm pretty sure Concerned Ape can't be human. So, abandoning the video game, but ruminating on character design, I moved on. The next step on my creative path was a book. No, not 2 Dimensions, Volume 1 and 2, available now at 2dimensions.ca, but a fantasy novel. The elevator pitch for Advent is that a lone hero ventures forth from his dying village at the end of human history. He journeys through the new growing civilization to try and prevent his own extinction. His decisions throughout the novel gradually grow darker and morally questionable the further he travels. We follow our hero until it's revealed, spoiler alert, that our protagonist is nothing more than a grim, dark plague trailing through a bright new world. This dark fantasy novel was a stretch outside of my comfort zone, to be sure. And, like most hermits, I hate leaving my comfort zone. And although I don't hate fantasy, I am much more engaged by science fiction. Honorable shout-out to my man, Isaac Asimov. Writing Advent was an opportunity for me to roll outside my usual grooves and open the flow of creative juices. Try putting a little of that in your coffee. It's delicious. I won't speak to Advent's premise any longer, as I'm planning on going back and polishing it up enough to be suitable for other eyes to behold. After several months of working away, I had finished the whole novel from start to finish. Granted, with a lot of touching up to take care of, but still finished. For the first time ever, I had taken a creative idea and kept at it long enough to reach an end. Before this, aside from short stories and schoolwork, I struggled to keep interest in projects, or simply failed to finish them. Through disinterest, exhaustion, rain, sleet, or snow, I powered through this time. I had become the mailman of writing. It was a moment of pure joy, but the work of a full-length novel had left me feeling winded and trapped in one thing for too long. Regardless, I did enjoy it. Hammering away every day at the book never burned me out. Instead, it helped focus my energy into creation and away from anxiety. Though, not entirely. That bad boy stuck to me like the venom symbiote. Finishing served as a reminder to me that not only do I love creating, but I need it to survive. If I was a happy lizard on a warm stone, writing would be my sun. Living a fulfilling existence would be an insurmountable struggle without creation. It's the best way I found to channel my neuroses into something positive. After completing the book draft, I needed a break from such a long-term engagement. So, naturally, in my typical idealistic fashion, I shifted pursuits once again. Another change, another creative endeavor. The last stop before 2 dimensions. Finishing Advent helped me gain the sweet, sweet sense of accomplishment that I crave, but also served to remind me how much I love writing. Because the kid who always wanted to be an author grew up, and now needs reminding of anything not tattooed on his body memento mori style. Transitioning to a similar vein as the novel, I flipped over to short stories, specifically a short horror story. One of them was even worth holding on to. Be on the lookout for the future release of The Watcher. It sure kept me up, because I wrote it at night. My endgame for the stories was to assemble them into a compilation. I planned on weaving them between a main story thread to structure them into one cohesive tale. A lot like the tales told by the only old person I respect, the spooky and erudite Crypt Keeper. I loved working on frightening content, but I was missing comedy, my joie de vivre, so I abandoned the short story compilation like an old mattress on the side of the highway. Luckily, the freedom of the format afforded me the chance to pursue more unique and unusual premises. This shift into the weird and bizarre unlocked the capacity my brain needed to develop our beloved space comedy. All the pieces were in place, with the egg of 2 dimensions taking form in my brain, preparing itself for hatching. The first thing on my to-do list, get my trusty shovel and pickaxe to dig out that old sketch of Sid. After the rediscovery of our favorite alien captain, I knew I needed at least a couple more characters to round out our starting team. Our favorite space bug, Ralph, was originally much longer and angrier looking. Perhaps he knew about all the torment Sid was going to put him through. I knew when drawing Ralph that I wanted him to be squishy, with a lot of legs, just my type. Omar followed, inspired by my favorite part of Earth, the mysterious ocean. I've heard rumor there's something alive down there. And rounding out the crew, in the early days, was Scully, the slug dragon. With the main cast assembled, the 2 Dimensions crew would first appear as framing devices for debate essays I dubbed at the time Brain Leaks. It covered such important questions as Pokemon or Digimon, and Should Batman kill? As entertaining as playing schizophrenic by arguing these points against myself was, something was still missing. Something was still terribly wrong. And then it clicked. Everything I had been working on suddenly fell into place and came together to form a cohesive idea. My first since weed was legalized. The path you travel may be winding, and you may never know just where it's taking you. But be sure to never let it take you into any dark caves. All those unfinished projects that trailed behind me the last few years were pieces in building something larger. 2 dimensions. Accepting and owning my art style allowed me to lean into designs I'm already naturally inclined toward. Probing deeper into comedy taught me how to structure the hilarious comics you've seen. If you haven't, why not? It's free at 2dimensions.ca. It's okay, I'll wait. Letting friends review and critique my work helped me get over the nerves of displaying my work. My brief foray into podcasting had my brain working on skits involving multiple people. And, since I like control, I needed to create someone to play the roles. Completing Advent rewarded me with a sense of accomplishment, and the knowledge that I can finish what I start, with a little discipline, which is good, since I only have a little to give. And the horror stories had me thinking differently, which guided me to create alien creatures for the comic. Original characters that had never before been seen. I took the tools I honed from my experiences and stitched together a Frankenstein's monster of a comic, my 2 dimensions, ready to go out and wreak havoc on an unsuspecting world. This video ended up taking much longer than I expected to make. Thank you for bearing with me while we figure out the best format for these videos. I will reveal more details on how I created the comic, and how I slowly improved the character designs in a later video. I can't wait to continue sharing my journey with you. And, if I may leave you with a piece of unsolicited advice. Work on what you love. You will find your niche. You may not find an audience, but if you're as lucky as I am, you will find your joy. I appreciate you hanging out. Until next time, see you in space. If you want to support 2 Dimensions, and gain access to tons of additional content, check out patreon.com/2dimensions. Or you can enjoy every 2 Dimensions comic for free at 2dimensions.ca. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. See you in space.